Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patrick Elliott. I am the Legal Director at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I've seen many of you at prior conventions. I've been here for 14 and a half years, and I'm going to start us off on our legal report and also introduce some of our legal staff, because necessarily the work we do involves a great amount of teamwork and effort. And so I want to have our full legal staff come up to the front here, and I can introduce some of them to you. We have a few on the photo here, but say hi to us. This is one place where lawyers are popular, so we have Hirsch Joshi, who's a legal fellow and attorney, Sammy Lawrence, who is a staff attorney, Chris Line, who's been taking pictures of all of you, he's also an attorney, a staff attorney, and Daniel Dossi, who works on our intake team. So thank you all. Some of our staff aren't here. Greta Martins is also in the room somewhere, who's our legal assistant, and Matt Langer, who's our legal assistant. So thank you all for the work you do. We want to make sure that they get recognized today as well. Thank you. And I did mention, we do we're received well here. So if you have questions, talk to staff one-on-one. That's great. We also are doing something a little bit different with the Q&A, and we tried this last year and it worked out pretty well. But we have note cards. Some of you have filled out to ask questions about the legal work that we do or the legal report. And there's a table with some of those right in the middle here with Sammy. And we also will have some staff on the outside of the aisles to hand out note cards and pens. If you want to ask questions, you can return those to the staff or to the table right over here. And we'll do some Q&A at the end of this program. So the work we do, we mentioned some of our staff. We do have an internship program as well. So we have students each summer from different law schools or different undergraduate universities. This year we had students from the University of Wisconsin, a student from the University of Virginia Law School, and from Vanderbilt University. So we're really doing a survey today about the legal work that we do, and to kind of give a big picture. I'm going to start off giving the big picture, and we have some other speakers who will cover some aspects of the work that we do. But part of why we're doing that is not everyone today appreciates and recognizes the need for state-church separation. And I wanted to share just an anecdote from my own life, because I think a lot of the younger generation today is less and less religious and is just going to church less and less. I grew up going to Catholic Mass every Sunday, went to a Catholic elementary school, and went through all the sacraments. In fact, I was only debaptized until our Hartford convention in 2011. If any of you were there, I remember it. I have my signed certificate from Dan Barker from my debaptism. But my religious upbringing is different than a lot of the younger generation. I have two young boys who are 5 and 3, and it's kind of apparent the differences. So earlier this year, when my son was actually 4, we were driving in the car, and we drove past a old and very ornate church. And we both saw it at the same time. And he says to me, "Dad, look at that castle." And I forget, he's never been to church. He doesn't know what this is. So it involved a little bit of explanation. And so when he's older, I can explain to him what we do for work, because he doesn't fully understand that. Before I left for the convention, I asked him, he knows that his mom is a nurse. That's easy to explain. What does Dad do? And he said, "You go to the judge and get people in trouble." And I wish that's how it worked. I wish we were doing that. But so when he's older, I think I can explain, really what we're doing is separating castles and the government. So this report will be that survey of the work we're doing. And we want to, flag, I think the obvious is that the Supreme Court has really done a lot of damage in recent years as to the Establishment Clause. And this slide has some of the headlines from over the last several years on what the court's doing. And I think part of why that is that the court doesn't think we have real people being harmed by state church violations today. And they're wrong on that. That's part of what we're going to talk about, is talking about how this impacts real people and some of the violations that are going on today. I think they think it's a thing of the past. And one of the Supreme Court cases from this last year, which some of you maybe saw in the news, was this case, FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. And this was by the group Alliance Defending Freedom as the attorneys on the case. And they really sought to restrict the previously approved FDA approval of the drug mifepristone, which is used for abortions. And one of the problems with this case is the other side thinks that there's no goalie, like that they can just go forward and press any claims regardless of the merits or regardless of the position of the plaintiffs. In this case, the plaintiffs were medical professionals who obviously don't take the drug, they don't prescribe the drug. They really were seeking to vindicate their religious beliefs and taking away the availability of a medication from others. And so Liz is going to talk a little bit or have a video about part of that case that I think is important to mention. And just one other case I wanted to note is one from my home state of Minnesota. And earlier this year, the state got sued by some religious colleges that participate in a program that is for public high school students can go to a public or private college, take secular courses, and get college credit while they're in high school. And so this has been going on for many decades, even when I was in high school. And one of the problems is some of these colleges were requiring the publicly paid for students to sign faith statements to go to take their classes. And these aren't just, I'm aligned with your beliefs. They were very much, you have to be Christian, you have to have a particular view about gay marriage and gender identity. Well, we heard earlier today from Kate Cohen that in 2023, Minnesota changed the law on another respects. So in 2023, the state changed the law and said, if you're getting public funding, you cannot make these publicly funded students sign your faith statements. That's discrimination. And so sure enough, that law went into effect, and the Beckett Fund, another religious organization, sued on behalf of the colleges and is suing the state of Minnesota. And so this is one case where we're working to push back against what the other side is doing. They think that there's a lot of any normal requirements for receiving government funding aren't applicable to them. So earlier this month, we filed a friend of the court brief in that case. And so we really do our legal work through these three building blocks, and we have three speakers to kind of address each block. Really, it's through education, through advocacy, and through litigation. And I'll introduce our speakers now, but we'll come up in sequence here. Again, if you have those Q&A questions, please return those cards, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your questions at the end. So to cover our advocacy work is Attorney Maddy Ziegler, who'll be covering our advocacy work. She's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, fellow alum of the University of Wisconsin Law School. She has worked as an attorney with FFRF for over 10 years. We have Sam Grover, who's FFRF's Senior Litigation Counsel. Sam is a graduate of Wesleyan University. He received his law degree from Boston University School of Law. Sam has worked with FFRF as an attorney for over 11 years. And first up, we'll have FFRF's Deputy Legal Director, Liz Cavell. Liz is a graduate of the University of Florida. She attended Tulane University Law School and has worked as an attorney with FFRF for over 12 years. Please welcome Liz Cavell.
Thank you, Patrick, and hello, everyone. Hi. So Patrick alluded to this, but it's an important part of explaining why we do the work we do, as those building blocks show. And that's that the federal courts, we know, have rapidly shifted recently to really favor the religious right, and that's especially pronounced at the U.S. Supreme Court, which has become extremely radical and in favor of the religious right. So our litigation team works hard and works strategically to get things done in the courts, and they're working harder than ever, but we know we can't rely on the courts alone. And so our attorneys are also always working to push FFRF's legal mission in the court of public opinion. And that's what we call legal education. That's using every tool and every medium at our disposal to educate on why the separation of state and church is so important, how it threatens our freedoms and our democracy, the threats that are facing it, and what we're doing to protect it. So I'm going to share just a few highlights from our legal education work this past year. So if you're an FFRF member or a superfan, you probably already know that we have a legal podcast. We Dissent is our monthly podcast, and it is in its 3rd year of production this year. FFRF started We Dissent, and the point was to highlight the voices of women attorneys in the secular movement, an underrepresented voice in atheism and secularism. And it's a coalition effort. So this year, many of you know that Rebecca Markert, our longtime legal director, left to join Americans United as their VP and legal director. And when that happened, we brought on Americans United as a production partner of We Dissent, and now it is a coalition effort, a joint production of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United, and American Atheists. I host it along with Rebecca Markert and Allison Gill, as you can see on the slide. And we have now in our 3rd year, we have 34 published episodes. We publish one every month. We've been downloaded more than 68,000 times. And then this past year in 2024, we covered wide-ranging topics: the Supreme Court term, the urgent state of reproductive rights. We covered taxing the churches, escalating state church threats in our public schools, Christian nationalism, current threats in our state legislatures, and more. And we also try to highlight as many women's voices in the secular movement as we can, not just ours. And to that end, we interviewed on the podcast Professor Marcy Hamilton, Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. We interviewed the executive director of Baptist Joint Committee, that's Amanda Tyler. And we interviewed political strategist Maya Rupert, among others. Another thing we do to push our message into the court of public opinion is FFRF's attorneys regularly write and publish blogs about relevant legal issues, trying to explain those issues or timely topics in the news to our membership and supporters and followers. Our attorneys published blogs this year on legal topics, including church polling places, anti-LGBTQ legislation and the onslaught, all of our litigation and Supreme Court decisions that are especially hard to break down. Our attorneys break them down in short blogs that are accessible to everyone. So for example, here we had Chris Line, our attorney, who blogged on what exactly the Chevron doctrine is and why the Supreme Court overruling it is such a big deal for state-church separation and everything we care about. We also had Sammy Lawrence, our staff attorney, blog breaking down the court's decision regarding the EMTALA statute and states' abortion bans interacting with the federal law that requires emergency rooms to stabilize patients in their care, including with abortion care. We also had Hirsch Joshi, who blogged on the very interesting and bizarre topic of the BAPS Hindu Church and how they could use RFRA to basically get away with labor trafficking in building their enormous New Jersey temple. So we also have our attorneys write op-eds or letters to the editor to get our message out and to combat misinformation that's appearing in those spaces about state-church separation and the issues affected by it. So there in the corner, you see Patrick Elliott, our legal director's op-ed, which was published in the Wisconsin State Journal about the absolute failure of the Wisconsin school voucher program, which is often misrepresented and held up as a voucher school success story, and the truth is anything but. Okay, so moving on. You might also be familiar with the FFRF-produced weekly live show, Ask an Atheist. Now, Ask an Atheist covers all kinds of topics of interest to freethinkers, atheists, agnostics, skeptics, but many of our episodes specifically cover legal topics, and our legal staff appears very frequently on the show to break down complicated legal topics for our supporters and to explain some of the legal work that FFRF is doing. So, a little sampling of our attorneys' appearances on Ask an Atheist this year. First video is a cut of 2 episodes featuring our attorneys explaining. Patrick talked about the mifepristone case. And so we want to explain to our members and supporters why we care about this case, why it affects the issues we care about, and how FFRF is getting involved. So the first part of the video is us reacting on Ask an Atheist to the oral arguments at the Supreme Court in the mifepristone case. And the second cut is us explaining the decision, but also explaining FFRF's amicus brief that we filed in the case, which was FFRF's position eviscerating the standing of the plaintiffs in that case, and ended up being a reflection of what the Supreme Court's decision turned on in that case. So here's that video.
Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Sammy Lawrence, a legal fellow here at FFRF. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a major case that deals with the FDA's regulation of mifepristone, a medication used in the majority of medication abortions here in America. Backed by a religious organization, several groups sued the FDA to try to restrict Americans' access to mifepristone. Today's show is titled, Dr. Alito, What Pills Can I Take? We're here to break down the court's arguments for you. I'm joined remotely by FFRF attorneys Liz Cavell and Patrick Elliott. This case was bogus from the beginning and definitely should not have made it this far, which is something that FFRF pointed out actually in the amicus brief that we filed along with American Atheists, where we told the Supreme Court essentially that the standing in this case is manufactured and it doesn't exist, and the court really needs to reconsider the way it's been favoring just outright Christian, often Protestant plaintiffs in these arguments in certain key cases over the last few years. Patrick, do you want to talk a little bit more about our amicus with AA?
Yeah, I think, one thing, and we could do a look back and say, did we do the right thing in filing our brief? And I was looking this morning at what do the other, groups talk about that filed briefs. At the Supreme Court, a lot of groups file these briefs. And I looked, and there were 35 friend of the court briefs on the side of the FDA. And only 4 of them discussed this issue, discussed the issue of the standing of groups and how absurd it was. And that was one of our brief was one of the 4 briefs that did that.
So in this next episode of Ask an Atheist, the clip I'm going to show is another example of us using Ask an Atheist as a tool for our legal staff to explain some of our legal advocacy work, what's going on, and how it's being talked about in the public. So this clip is our attorneys reacting on Ask an Atheist to State Representative Lauren Ventrella, a co-author of the Louisiana bill that mandated the 10 Commandments be posted in every public school classroom in the entire state. Let's roll that.
What do you say to the parents of students or even teachers who don't share your religious views?
Don't look at it.
What would you say if your child had to go to a classroom in which the 5 pillars of Islam were required to be on the wall? How would you feel?
Again, this is not about the 5 pillars of Islam. This bill specifically states the 10 Commandments.
Wow, what a strong rebuttal. I'm sold, personally.
Yeah, it's like she didn't understand that, that was identifying a problem by analogy. She's just like, oh, no, don't worry, no Islam in the public schools.
Yeah, I like that she's just like, we do not care about these children's feelings, to be clear.
Yeah, so she obviously dodged the question or even misunderstood the question. She went on to say that she doesn't understand why litigation is being threatened, and even said, bring it on. Governor Landry also said he, quote, can't wait to be sued. Well, Governor, your wish has been granted.
And finally, another way our attorneys and legal team educates in the courts of public opinion is by speaking engagements. So our attorneys speak at FFRF chapter gatherings, at conferences and conventions for freethinkers and other groups all over the country. We present at continuing legal education seminars for our fellow attorneys and also judges. Any chance we get to spread the gospel of state-church separation and explain the work that we do, we jump at that chance because we know that we're trying to reach all kinds of different audiences with why state-church separation is so important, not just the courts. And so here on this slide, we just have a few examples from the year. You can see me speaking at the Kentucky Free Thought Convention that was just earlier this month. You see Patrick Elliott, he spoke at the Minnesota Day of Reason that was hosted by the Minnesota Humanists. And there's Chris Line, who was invited to speak to the Ozarks chapter of FFRF earlier this year as well. So that's a little bit of the flavor of what we've been doing this year in our legal education-focused efforts. And now I'm going to turn it over to Maddy Ziegler. She leads our intake team, and she will take you through the highlights from our legal advocacy work this year. Thanks.
Thank you very much. As Liz said, hi, I'm Maddy Ziegler, intake attorney. I'm also just getting over a cold, so please forgive my voice. And I'm here to give you an overview of FFRF's non-litigation advocacy since the last convention. Right. So we were able to resolve 185 constitutional violations outside of court just by sending a letter of complaint. Nearly all of those in the public schools. In total, our team sent 683 letters of complaint since the last convention, about half of those to the schools and half to other types of government entities. And we know that there are victories that we never hear about, that they don't bother to tell us about, so there are almost certainly more victories beyond those 185 that we've confirmed. So I'll give a brief and incomplete survey of some of these complaints and that we have been working on and that we've resolved. Out of all of those letters, this is the breakdown of letters sent per capita, perhaps about what you'd expect. I'll draw your attention in particular, though, to Oklahoma as one of our most contacted states. He's been mentioned already, but here he is again. We've had quite a few run-ins with Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction and Christian nationalist Ryan Walters. Our litigation team has been battling him in court, and the intake team has dealt with him several times as well. The first time was in Prague, Oklahoma, that's the correct pronunciation, last November, after we stopped an elementary school from having morning prayers over their loudspeaker. Staff attorney Chris Line sent a letter of complaint after we learned about this. The school district, as you can see, had been posting pictures of students on Facebook who had been leading the prayers, claiming that they just volunteered to do it, and it was all the elementary school students' idea to lead the prayers. We did put a stop to this practice, but Ryan Walters had a reaction to this victory. We have a video.
Today we see Prague Public Schools backing down to a radical atheist group. You know, we're going to continue to fight for religious liberty and religious freedom here in the state of Oklahoma. What we've seen as a group that's funded by George Soros, that is atheist, that is from out of state, has come in and targeted children that are initiating prayer in Prague Public Schools. But, you know, just as bad, we have Prague Public Schools bowing down to these bullies and telling their students that they're not going to allow them to initiate prayer anymore. It's outrageous. We have to take a stand for our students' freedom of religion, their freedom to express their religious beliefs, no matter what those religious beliefs may be. So what we've got to do is we've got to tell groups like the Freedom from Religion group, like the ACLU, we will never back down to your bullying antics. We will not allow atheism to be the state-sponsored religion of our school system. Not here in Oklahoma. You guys need to leave our kids alone. We will not stand for it, and we will continue to fight for religious liberty here in the state of Oklahoma.
FFRF called on him to resign. Unfortunately, he did not. And we had a further incident this February. He visited Riverside Elementary School to read to students and began by leading them in prayer. We have a video of that as well that he posted himself on his Twitter account.
Very good. Hey, look, I love that you guys are paying attention, guys. I appreciate you guys so much. I'm so excited to read with you guys today, so thank you for letting me be here. Before we do that, I'm just going to say a quick prayer real fast. Dear God, thank you for these wonderful students, and thank you for letting us be here today. God, I want you to please be with the state of Israel, our country, our nation, our state, and our schools. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with these wonderful students today. Amen.
So the administration of this school district told us that they were shocked that Walters led students in prayer and would ensure this does not happen in the future. But we had to call on schools to not invite the state superintendent to their schools anymore because he might lead the students in prayer. So we will be continuing to battle Ryan Walters' Christian nationalism. Another interesting complaint we've dealt with in the last year in Tennessee, Staff Attorney Sammy Lawrence wrote to the Robertson County Schools after their basketball coach invited a Fellowship of Christian Athletes representative to practice. Students who won a free throw competition received the prize of washing their fellow teammates' feet while their coach read from the Bible. This is an open complaint that we are actively following up on. In California, Staff Attorney Chris Lyons sent a letter after a teacher at Mission Oak High School in Tulare, California, had been using his position to promote his personal religious views to students. The teacher had placed several inappropriate religious and political displays, including some on a fridge in his classroom, which you can see here. They include a sticker that says "Pray Without Ceasing," a Fellowship of Christian Athletes logo, and several conservative political messages. Additionally, this teacher instigated a discussion with students about 666 being the devil's number, which led to a student revealing their atheism. The teacher told another student who asked what an atheist was that an atheist is a fool. The district responded very quickly, however, by having the teacher remove the stickers and assured us that corrective measures had been taken in regards to the statements. Inmates at Minnesota's brand new Itasca County Jail facility will not be forced to look at a massive 2-story tall 10 Commandments display after legal fellow Hirsch Joshi wrote a letter of complaint. This display, as well as some other religious quotes that had been painted on the walls, were painted over. Staff Attorney Sammy Lawrence got a Christian Little Free Library removed that had a cross on it and was filled with and meant for only Christian books. The Illinois DOT had not issued a permit for this Little Free Library, which was on public property, and they had a crew take it down. I sent a letter of complaint to the General McLean School District in Pennsylvania after first grade students were sent on a field trip to WLD Ranch, which included prayer and proselytizing remarks led by camp staff. WLD Ranch's mission is to guide campers and guests to Jesus as the truth in life. After multiple follow-ups, the superintendent finally told us that the district would no longer be going to this camp. So I'll finish rapid fire with several religious displays that FFRF got taken down from public property. This Bible verse, "Now all glory to God, who is able through his mighty power at work within us to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or imagine," was posted above a middle school classroom in Oklahoma. Chris Line sent a letter of complaint, and our complainant reported to us that this display was removed. Sammy Lawrence wrote to a school in Minnesota after it was reported that an elementary school classroom had this religious poster up reading, "Just think, you're here not by chance, but by God's choosing to fulfill his special purpose for this generation." Again, after multiple follow-ups, it was reported to us that this poster was removed. Chris Line got this prayer thanking the Lord for food and asking for blessings on it removed from a cafeteria at an elementary school in Virginia. A Hancock County, Indiana sheriff's vehicle featuring a prominent Christian cross, as you see, decal displayed on the rear window. After Hirsch Joshi sent a letter of complaint, this decal was removed. And finally, a Bible verse reading, "Whatever you do, do it for the glory of God," in a Mobile High School baseball dugout in Alabama, was promptly painted over after a letter from Chris Line. So again, this was just a small sampling of the complaints we've handled over the past year, with religious displays overrepresented because they're fun to show you visually. But you can read more about many of these, all of these, over 100 victories on our website and in Free Thought today. Next up is Sam Grover to talk about litigation. Thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. All right, so in addition to all of the great letter writing and education we do, we also do sometimes go to court, and that's my department. So just a brief overview by the numbers of what we've done since the last convention. First, we've won 6 lawsuits since last year. Yeah, over and done with, completely closed. I'll talk about some of them. We have 2 new lawsuits, one of which is already a victory, which leaves us with 3 lawsuits that we're currently litigating in progress. We have at least 3 more that we're actively contemplating. And finally, we filed 11 amicus briefs, friend of the court briefs, since last year's convention in order to advance our mission in cases brought by others. So let's dive in, and I'll highlight some of what we've accomplished. First up, let's start with a case that we filed and won this year. So when the Satanic Temple first sought equal access to rent school facilities in Memphis area public schools in order to hold an after-school Satan club, the public backlash was immediate and fierce. Let's watch.
We told you about the Satanic Temple's plans to hold a meeting after school at Chimney Rock Elementary next month. Now, as WREG's April Thompson reports, more people are speaking out, including school board leaders and the superintendent.
Surrounded by members of the clergy, Memphis Shelby County school leaders added their voices to what has become a public outcry over a satanic club using school facilities for a meeting.
I want to assure you that I do not endorse, I do not support the beliefs of this organization at the center of the recent headlines.
Yeah, so while the superintendent initially said some of the right things, that the district wouldn't discriminate against TST while providing access to other religious clubs like the Good News Club, ultimately the district did discriminate. So it began charging the club excessive fees, canceling its reservations, and refusing to communicate with TST. So in March of this year, FFRF filed a lawsuit on behalf of TST with our newest attorney, Sammy Lawrence, and Patrick, serving as our in-house counsel. Shortly after we filed the suit, the district reached out to begin settlement negotiations. In July, the lawsuit was settled and voluntarily dismissed. The school district agreed to treat TST's club equally going forward, and it paid FFRF and our cooperating attorneys over $15,000 in attorney's fees and costs. And I think June, the organizer of the TST's clubs, is here. Hi. Yeah, sit up. Thank you, June, for bringing After School Satan. Okay. So next up, we've got FFRF v. Abbott. So another court victory that we secured this year comes from a lawsuit we filed back in 2016. A lot of you probably remember it when we first talked about it at prior conventions. So after Texas Governor Greg Abbott censored this display, our Bill of Rights nativity scene in the Texas Capitol. Here's a picture of the display right after it was placed in the Capitol, surrounded by some of our Texas members and supporters. Abbott had the display removed shortly after this, calling it tasteless and claiming that it contributed to public immorality. So we sued to protect our free speech rights, and in 2018, we won. Hooray. Then Abbott appealed, got the case kicked back to the district court for a technical rewording of our victory, and while it was back in the district court, he tried to undo our win. In 2021, we won again. Abbott appealed again, and after a second round of argument before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2023, we won again. Now, finally, the saga comes to an end. We've been awarded our attorney's fees and costs from the state in the amount of $358,000. Yeah, good for us, bad for the taxpayers of Texas who had to, pay that fund. So Abbott, spent this money and, resources, state resources, trying to discriminate against us, and thanks to our legal team, we won. But if you're one of our Texas members and you'd like a refund for the taxes that you personally paid towards this lawsuit, feel free to find me later, and I'll give you a shiny penny. Or better yet, call the governor's office and demand a refund from Abbott himself. Please. Yeah, I don't actually have pennies on me. I'm not good for that. Call Abbott. All right. Finally, in ongoing litigation, I want to highlight a new lawsuit that FFRF brought with some coalition partners challenging a new Louisiana law that would require all public schools to display the 10 Commandments in every classroom. The commandments must be the central focus of each poster and must be printed in large, easily readable font. The coalition filed a motion for a preliminary injunction on July 8, which would stop displays from going up while our lawsuit continues. And in it, we argue that Louisiana's law substantially interferes with and burdens parents' First Amendment rights to direct their children's religious or non-religious upbringing. And that by mandating the display of a specific version, the Protestant version of the Ten Commandments, Louisiana has taken sides on questions of theological debate, which violates the Establishment Clause. The state, in turn, has come up with a wild defense, which is that despite the clear wording in its own law that the Ten Commandments must be the central focus of the display, the state created a bunch of odd posters, like this one, that look like they were made by middle schoolers, and they feature other things in addition to the Ten Commandments, like Hamilton. Or there's this one, which is apparently about memes and features Regina George from the movie Mean Girls. All right, so at any rate, we have an oral argument scheduled on this motion for a preliminary injunction in October, so be sure to look for updates on the case in Free Thought Today, on our radio show, or however you typically hear from us. That's ongoing litigation. I'm going to turn now to amicus briefs. So our work in the litigation department isn't just our own lawsuits, obviously. That would limit our efficacy greatly. A lot of our influence comes through advocacy made through friend of the court briefs that we file in lawsuits brought by others. Patrick already discussed 2 of these at the top, and I'd like to highlight just a few more of the 11 that we've filed since the last convention. So first we have Spectrum WTV Wendler. In this case, FFRF filed a brief on behalf of the Secular Student Alliance in support of students at West Texas A&M, whose charity drag show was canceled by university president Walter Wendler, based on his personal religious beliefs and bigotry. Our brief argued that Wendler engaged in viewpoint discrimination when he censored the student's speech. The brief also argued that the politically hostile climate in the United States has made drag shows inherently political acts, which is important for the court's free speech analysis. Next, we have Mentam Methodist Church v. Morris County. So this is related to a case that we filed, that FFRF filed in 2015, regarding Morris County's practice of issuing historic preservation grants that were funding the repair of churches, not just the facade, but like their HVAC and things like that. We won that lawsuit at the New Jersey Supreme Court, and now a new set of churches are trying to undo our victory in federal court. So our brief, our friend of the court brief in the new case, argues that the New Jersey's religious aid clause reflects a historic interest in not funding the building or maintenance of places of worship. And we explained that if the plaintiffs are granted relief and given funding, that it would result in inequitable financial support for favored religious groups and negative entanglement of religion and government. Let's see, next in August, we filed a brief in Klug v. Brownsburg Community School Corporation. This case centered around a public school orchestra teacher who refused to use his transgender students' first names, their official names as they appear in the school's database, due to his personal religious beliefs and bigotry. So Klug was initially granted a religious accommodation to only use students' last names, but this proved unworkable because all of his students knew why he was doing that. He eventually resigned and then sued the school, claiming that it discriminated against him. So the appeals court now must answer whether Klug's requested religious accommodation amounts to undue hardship for the school. And our amicus brief argues that that analysis must consider the unique interests that come up in the public school environment. And additionally, our brief argues that teachers have a position of authority over students and cannot be allowed to abuse that authority. Basic common sense stuff. Finally, briefly, we have an upcoming amicus brief that we plan to file to the Wisconsin Supreme Court over this 1849 law that supposedly criminalizes abortion. Lower court has already ruled that it only applies to infanticide, not consensual abortions. And now both the Wisconsin Attorney General and Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin have moved to intervene in the case, and our brief demonstrates that anti-abortion advocacy is primarily motivated by a politically powerful, vocal religious minority whose policies are ultimately not supported by the majority of Americans. That's upcoming. With that, I'm going to turn the podium back over to Patrick, and I think we might have time for some Q&A. So.
We've had that box out, so I haven't seen these. Not that this is a magic trick, but we'll take some of your questions, and hopefully our staff can answer them. Again, if you want to meet with any of us one-on-one, we're happy to chat law and religion. That's what we do. So the first one, I guess we'll start with Liz, and we can go down the line. But what is your favorite thing about working at FFRF?
It's cheesy, but it's the staff. We have the best staff in the business. Many of us have worked together for a lot of years, a lot of trauma bonding over the rapidly shifting landscape. But it is the hardest working, most creative, irreverent, smart, kind, hardworking group of people you could ever want to work with. So best in the business.
So for my work, which as you heard is sort of sending out the letters of complaint on behalf of all of you, some of you literally in this room, is being able to resolve some of those violations for you. You saw over 150 times in the last year, our team has gotten to come back to you guys and say, hey, this issue that you brought to us, we were able to resolve it for you. So it's just this really concrete win that we're able to achieve, which is really great.
I love this question, and I think, given our outsized influence, sometimes we present to be a bigger organization than we are. My favorite part of FFRF is that in addition to doing litigation, legal advocacy, I also get to do fun things like go on Ask an Atheist or host our Thanksgiving special or hang pictures in the hallway because we're just like an all hands on deck kind of group. That's why the pictures in our office are all a little bit too high.
And I was originally not going to chime in, but I think Maddy, your response brought to mind. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, but I think sometimes issues that we deal with have stick with you over the years, and one that really stuck with me, which isn't a thing that happened this year, but is a violation that we have addressed, was in a West Virginia school system that had Bible instruction for over 75 years in all of their elementary schools. We sued and got that stopped, but in the process, we got to meet the people involved, and it really made me proud because the parent had her first grader who was having Bible class. The first grader was going and sitting by herself in a separate classroom, and so I really think we prevented any other students from having to go through that. And so it really made me, again, this happened, we won this case over a year ago, but I keep going back to the idea that preventing that other kids from having that experience, I think, is really valuable. Okay, so this is, I may not fully understand this question, but this is just regarding the letters that lead to victories. This is a question about, how do we go about publicizing these actions in the communities where the constitutional violations arise? These are moments to, educate, people about state church separation. So I don't know, Liz, maybe you'd be the...
Yeah. Well, so we're talking here today about how our legal team works with all the tools we can come up with to advance our legal mission, but of course, that's only half the story of FFRF. We have a communications staff, we have an administrative staff, and everyone is working together to highlight the legal work we do. And so a big part of especially Maddy's letter writing advocacy operation involves working with our communications staff to publicize violations strategically. So sometimes when we can't get much traction or cooperation from local government actors, we use media exposure to exert pressure or shame onto a school district, a superintendent, a government entity to help get to a resolution. Oftentimes we use our communications staff to publicize litigation or propose litigation to try and bring potential plaintiffs or attorneys out of the woodwork who are in a local area and want to support the work that we're trying to do in your area. So yeah, we use communication strategically to advance our legal work pretty much in every way. And that's down to a lot of other staffers who aren't up on this stage, but do a lot of grueling communications work.
Yeah, I also think, you've all probably witnessed this in your own states or your communities. When we do a letter, like in the videos that Dan and Annie Laurie showed earlier this morning, when we send the letter, those news stories on social media, and the reactions are huge. Obviously, people really care about the issues we're working on, and a lot of people are on our side, even though they may not be as vocal, but for some reason those stories in the social media aspect, or if you've ever, sometimes when we send a complaint, that will be the highest attendance at a school board meeting or a county commissioners meeting that you've ever seen. We make the analogy, it's like in Beauty and the Beast where they like all storm the castle with like torches. That has happened in some of our cases where sometimes we've actually fixed a problem, so the government's doing the right thing, and you see this reaction from the community. So I think even just in that sense, we're doing educational work by showing the necessity of state-church separation. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to address this one. Maybe I brought this question on because we were talking about the Supreme Court. It says, what can we do to bring change to the U.S. Supreme Court?
Shall I rant?
Yeah.
Yes. If you listen to the podcast, then, play on your phone because you've heard me evangelize this to no end. But I think it's so important to be everywhere that we are talking about the Supreme Court or talking to people who vote and thinking about Supreme Court reform as an issue. The Supreme Court is actually part of the constitutional order. It is not somehow up above the democratic process. So we have a Supreme Court that is completely out of step with what the majority of the country wants. It is completely unaccountable and refuses to be held accountable even by basic ethical standards of professional conduct. It is openly corrupt in the sense that there's like bribery and all kinds of poor ethical behavior. And the reality is, it is subject to checks and balances. Like, this is middle school civics 101. Congress actually has the power to legislate about the court's jurisdiction, how many members the court has, things that the court has ruled on that it wants to undo, like codifying Roe versus Wade. And so there are a number of things that our elected officials can do to rein in the abuses of power that we're seeing at our Supreme Court. So it's important as voters to understand that and to demand that and to talk about the court in that way. They're not above the democratic process. We think of them as apolitical, they should be, but they're not like a-democratic. They are part of the democratic process.
The other, obviously everything Liz said is great. One thing that on the litigation side, I think that Sam and I and our attorneys who file those friend of the court briefs have done is not have like kid gloves when talking about what the court's doing. So we did that in that FDA case this year, going through how there is no conception that any civil rights group like ours or any other group would have gotten that far in court. It's impossible. So in order to do that, we have to explain, what are the basic principles of the court's ruling on cases, and how are all the other cases where the court says, no, we don't think we should rule on this, and they all happen to be, civil rights cases that the court doesn't want to handle. And I feel kind of dirty saying this, but we wrote this brief, and then I read Justice Kavanaugh's opinion, and it's like he's copying kind of what I need AI to like compare these two, but it's the similar argument that we presented in our brief, that yes, you can't just manufacture a case and try to ban a medication that somebody else is using. Of course, that goes against all rules of standing. So I think this isn't the same issue as how do we address the court, but I think we can just talk to them and the media that will read our briefs, because we do get sometimes interviewed on our amicus briefs about Supreme Court issues, is really pointing out this goes against everything you say in every other case. So you need to stop playing favorites. And so in that case, at least we won in one, maybe one Supreme Court case we've won in the last few years in terms of what our side went on. So I do think that's an important piece too, is, and it's not just our organization, but people calling out the court on what it's doing. I don't think there's as much mystique and mystery about it that it's just, calling balls and strikes. It's very much a political body in the current environment. All right, and then I have also this Supreme Court question. Also, our legislative team is going to be coming up next, and I have a feeling they're going to be talking about some of that as well. So it's not, we're the legal side, and you're going to hear from some of our team that work on legislative issues. So the last question I have here is there litigation pursuing a withdrawal of 501c3 status for churches regarding their political and election activity?
Yeah, so we have long complained and alerted the IRS about individual churches promoting specific political candidates, which they're not allowed to do. It's something we continue to do, and taking a case on that it would be difficult to sue the IRS for lack of action to address that problem with any one given church. But it's something that overall, systemically, there probably does need to be some sort of accountability. So I don't know if that there could be a legislative solution, but it probably doesn't make sense to sue the IRS over inaction to punish one specific church.
Yeah, we've tried. We've probably sued the IRS more than other organizations, and a lot of times, like I mentioned, on standing, it can be very difficult to pursue those unless you have the exact right circumstances. So it's an issue we work on a lot. I know Maddy has sent many letters this year. Obviously, in a presidential election year, there's a lot of churches being involved in election activity, and we do report those. So at least we're bringing the problem to them and showing the problem, and the agency so far, at least publicly, hasn't shown that it's very active in enforcing it. But that may change, or there may be things going on behind the scenes that we don't really see.
Can I just say, we report that, and you can too. It's just a form you fill out, so please feel free to do that. There's instructions in our FAQ on this issue on our website.
All right, I think that covers it for the legal panel.